I'm curious as to what the profile, in particular, of the is of the females who run the brothels. So we spend a whole lot of time, obviously, and understandably, speaking about the victims. But I'd be curious to know, to what extent maybe abuse may have played a role. Obviously, abusers tend to have been abused earlier in life. But if that is a part of your response, I'll preemptively also ask, you to discuss sort of where the culpability begins and where it ends, because I don't think that in and of itself would be an appropriate justification, given that lots of people are abused and ultimately aren't also abusers. And the second part of the question that's sort of related to victimhood and this timeline of progression relates also to the men. Obviously, we see them in their current state, but at one point they were young, also innocent children and boys. And so I'm curious also about that profile, if you can discuss a little bit about what the turning points have been in your estimation and based on the data that you've seen over time.
The question is about the women who run the brothels and what is the profile of the woman that is doing that kind of job. Is it somebody who had been abused as a child? And also the men and where they are coming from.
If you'll say something about the women, I want the men. I guess I get the men.
I looked at you while
I saw it.
So the brothel managers are the women. And this is just a practical decision that brothel owners actually take, because these women who are the managers are just there to ensure that all the medical needs of the prostituted girls are taken care of by these managers if they need to go to hospital, because there's a lot of violence inside the brothels, and women are beaten black and blue, cigarette butts are stuffed out on them, bottles are shoved up their vaginas, there are fractures. I met a doctor who said he had to keep stitching up women's vaginas again and again because there was so much brutality. So these brothel managers have to manage the medical needs of the prostituted women and girls inside the brothels. They are appointed by the brothel owners, who are normally men, and they are appointed from a selection of aging out prostituted girls who cannot attract customers anymore, but who have got desensitized and beaten so much that they are willing to do anything for the brothel owners. And so those are the people who you see in the films and the movies as brothel managers. But they really don't have any control of the situation, except to make sure that the girls are available, ready, sexually available, and if there are any medical emergencies, those are taken care of. It's the pimps and the brothel owners who actually control the whole prostitution system in the red light districts of Calcutta and Bombay and Delhi. The other thing about the men, Swanee's organization Demand Abolition has been doing a lot of work on this, so I would like her to answer this.
Our work is just in the United States, right? With the idea that, first of all, a lot of the business around the world is American guys. The expats or guys on sex tours. And it's extraordinary. It is extraordinary. But just in the United States, there's a lot of research on this, and I won't go into all of that, except very interesting to your point, about half of the buying, meaning by the jobs, about half of that is done by 5% of the buyers. And so those are the ones that we particularly want to understand, because unless you understand them, you can't understand how you stop them. These are men who are white. They buy between 70, 75 times a year. They live in the suburbs. They're married with children. And their average income is $120,000 a year. And one of the girls told me in Boston, she said, the time that my phone was ringing the most, she was probably 14, the time my phone was ringing the most was on Monday mornings, around 9 o'clock, as the men were driving into work after a weekend with the family. You've got to really understand this. When people say, do you know women or girls who've been trafficked? Yes, to be sure. And I really appreciated in the films when the Canadian, it went by quickly, but talking about how you have to have the survivors be included in coming up with the solutions. It's critical in the United States. But when I try to think about, do I know survivors? Yes, definitely, hundreds. Do I know pimps? I don't think so. Do I know Johns? Absolutely, huge numbers. Really? Like, how many do I actually know are Johns? Maybe 3, but I know hundreds, in fact. I just don't know who they are. But I can tell you they're in my class at Harvard, and I can tell you that they're at my church, and I can tell you that they're in my apartment building, and I can tell you that they're in my family. Statistically, they are a large portion of our population.
Is there any research which shows what makes them a John? I think that was his question. Like, what drives someone into becoming a John?
Or
What did you say?
Or pimp. John or pimp.
Well, what I've heard in terms of the pimps is there is a history of sexual abuse that's very high. I don't hear that in terms of the Johns. In fact, my sense, and this is why I'm active in this, actually it isn't because of my work on gender, believe it or not. It's because of my work on white privilege, and because the large percentage in the United States of women and girls who are being prostituted are black-brown. And very large percentage of the buyers are white. And that sense of entitlement is extraordinary.
Let's take another question. And unfortunately, it might be the last one. Yes?
Hi, thank you very much for the films and for the panel. I have a question about the film that featured Miriam, with the young boy who sold, I believe he sold her into the marriage. I was wondering with your experience, what is being done about the boys? How are the boys being addressed? That boy was uneducated, did not have many options. With NGOs and other work, how are they being helped so that they're not selling their relatives?
I'll speak about India, and maybe somebody else has experience about US and other countries. But in India, not enough is being done, and simply like they'll pick up someone like that and put him into jail, and then he'll come out and traffic 2 more girls and then 10 more girls till he's like a hardened criminal forever. And there are NGO efforts where we go into villages and talk to men and say it's not okay to send your daughter, sister, cousin to a city in Mumbai, Delhi, Calcutta, even if you think it's just a job, because this job has these repercussions. So we show movies and do street theater and sing songs and things like that. Even send back survivors to tell their life stories. But the pressure on people like him is so much because they are normally either from indigenous groups or they are from very low caste communities. Caste is a kind of racism in India where, and some of you may have heard the word Dalit or
Actually, we had a
backward
film
classes.
last night exactly about that.
So these are communities who are relegated to and forced to stay in the most menial jobs and professions based on their birth to the caste that they are born to. And there's a whole feeling that some caste groups should be sexually available for upper caste men, and the men of the oppressed castes are forced to sell their wives, their daughters, and pimp them. And if they don't, then the upper caste gangs beat them up. And normally the police and people who have power and authority are also from upper castes. So they don't, the sense of entitlement that Swanee was talking about is so great that a man like him will be the one punished, whereas all the people buying the girl and forcing the man to pimp the girl will not be punished.
It's very interesting because that's part of the reason why we have included gender equality in this conversation. And the same, also we're seeing a parallel here about the relatives being involved in the issue. I'm sure in your case as well with the India situation, a lot of times these girls are put into trafficking or prostitution by their own families. And in the case of Jessica's film, it was a relative who had inflicted those rapes. And it's just horrendous when you think about all these things. I wish we could continue this conversation, but time is running. It's getting the best out of us, and there are other films that are coming after us. But let me tell you in a nutshell why I started this film festival, because it is very closely related to a situation of violence against women. 13 years ago, I had the misfortune of losing my cousin and my uncle to a violent hate crime. And as the 10th anniversary, actually more, 2004 we are talking about, as the 10th anniversary of their death approached, I wanted to do something meaningful and something anti-violence also, because I was getting sick and tired of seeing violence in movies, in films, depicting violent situations, gratuitous violence, violent forms of movie making with strong sound effects, abrupt cuts. It's like you're being hit over the head instead of being told a story. And that's how the Socially Relevant Film Festival was born. And as it was born, I created an award in my cousin's name. It's called the Vanya Ekserjan Empowering Women and Girls Award. And every year we offer this award to a film that depicts a story about empowering women and girls. A couple of years ago, Ruchira joined me on awards night, and she helped me present that award to someone, one of the winners of that film. And in fact, Jessica also was the first winner of that award. Tonight, we are offering that award to someone who deserves that award very, very much. The Vanya Ekserjan Empowering Women and Girls Award presented to Ruchira Gupta. Yes, in fact it is.